Marcus, who is she? Aisha's voice trembled as she stared at the pregnant woman sitting beside her husband in the hospital waiting room. Marcus didn't even hesitate before answering coldly, "The woman I should have married." In that moment, Aisha's world shattered. 6 months pregnant and already abandoned emotionally, she had come alone to her doctor's appointment, only to discover that her husband had been building another family behind her back. Welcome to True Love Stories, where we share interesting and intriguing stories. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Do not forget to like and share. Now let's dive into the story. The early morning sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the modern townhouse Marcus and Aisha Bennett shared in Buckhead, Atlanta. The home was beautiful: sleek marble floors, minimalist decor, and a large open living space filled with expensive furniture Marcus had insisted on buying. But despite the elegance surrounding her, Aisha felt deeply alone. She sat quietly on the edge of their king-size bed, her hands resting gently on her 6-month pregnant belly. Her skin glowed softly under the warm light, and she wore a comfortable cream maternity dress that flowed loosely around her figure. A silk caramel-colored head wrap held back her thick curls, and her face carried a natural beauty that no makeup could improve. Yet her eyes looked tired of hoping, tired of waiting, tired of feeling invisible. Across the bedroom, Marcus stood in front of the large mirror, adjusting the cuff of his tailored navy suit. Marcus Bennett had always been handsome and sharply dressed. At 34, he carried himself with the confidence of a successful businessman. His beard was trimmed perfectly, his shoes shined like glass, and his expensive gold watch reflected the light each time he moved his wrist. To anyone outside their marriage, Marcus looked like a man who had everything together. But inside their home, he had become distant, cold, unreachable. Aisha watched him silently for a moment before speaking. Her voice was gentle, almost hesitant. "Marcus, my doctor's appointment is tomorrow morning." He didn't respond. He continued fixing his tie, barely acknowledging that she had spoken. She swallowed, trying again. "It's the big checkup. The doctor said we might even hear the baby's heartbeat again." Still nothing. Her fingers tightened slightly around the soft fabric of her dress. "Could you come with me this time?" she asked quietly. Marcus finally sighed, but not in a sympathetic way. It was the impatient sigh of someone who felt inconvenienced. "Aisha, I told you already," he said while grabbing his phone from the dresser. "I've got meetings tomorrow." She looked down at her belly and rubbed it slowly. "This is our baby," she whispered. Marcus slipped on his suit jacket without looking at her. "And the doctor knows what they're doing. You don't need me there." The word stung. During the first months of her pregnancy, Aisha had convinced herself Marcus was simply busy. His construction company had been expanding, and he often came home late. But lately it felt like he wasn't even trying anymore. He barely asked how she felt. He never touched her stomach to feel the baby move. Sometimes he would go days without mentioning the pregnancy at all. Aisha gathered the courage to speak again. "I just thought, maybe this time we could go together, like other couples do." Marcus grabbed his car keys from the nightstand. "I'll be late tonight," he said bluntly. That was his answer. No reassurance. No hug. No apology. Just distance. The front door slammed a few seconds later. The sound echoed through the quiet house. Aisha sat there for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway as if hoping he might suddenly come back. But the silence only grew heavier. Her eyes slowly filled with tears. She placed both hands over her stomach and leaned back against the headboard. "I know you felt that," she murmured softly to the baby. "You felt Mommy get sad." A tiny movement pressed against her palm. The baby kicked. Despite everything, the small motion made her smile through her tears. "Well, I guess it's just you and me tomorrow," she said gently. Downstairs, the large house felt even emptier. The kitchen counters were spotless, the living room perfectly arranged, and the television sat untouched. It looked like the home of a successful couple, yet it lacked the warmth of a real family. Later that evening, Aisha cooked dinner for two out of habit, baked salmon, rice, and steamed vegetables. She set Marcus's plate across from hers at the dining table, the way she always did. Hours passed. The food grew cold. Marcus never came home. Around midnight, she quietly wrapped his plate in foil and placed it in the refrigerator. Her body felt heavy from the pregnancy, and the exhaustion weighed on her shoulders as she slowly walked upstairs. When she finally lay down in bed, the empty space beside her seemed larger than ever. Tears slid silently down the side of her face as she stared at the ceiling. "What happened to us, Marcus?" she whispered into the darkness. But the only response was silence. And deep in her heart, a painful thought began forming, a thought she wasn't ready to face yet. Marcus wasn't just busy. He was drifting away. And Aisha had no idea how far he had already gone. The next morning, the sky over Atlanta was pale gray, the kind of quiet morning that made the city feel slower than usual. Aisha stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, carefully adjusting the soft beige maternity set she had chosen for her appointment. The outfit was simple but elegant, a loose long-sleeve top paired with matching maternity pants and clean white sneakers. She tied a satin scarf around her head and applied a light layer of lip gloss, trying to look presentable even though she felt emotionally drained. Her eyes drifted toward the empty side of the bed. Marcus had never come home the night before. Aisha inhaled slowly, pushing the thought away. Stress wasn't good for the baby. She had read that in almost every pregnancy book she owned. "It's okay," she murmured to herself as she picked up her purse and medical folder. "We'll be fine." A few minutes later, she stepped outside and called a rideshare. The driver greeted her politely as she carefully climbed into the back seat, one hand supporting her belly. "Northside Medical Center, please," she said softly. The drive across the city was quiet. Atlanta traffic buzzed around them, people rushing to work, coffee shops filling up, life moving forward like any other morning. But Aisha sat quietly in the back seat staring out the window, her thoughts wandering. She imagined what it would feel like if Marcus had come with her. Maybe he would hold her hand during the ultrasound. Maybe they would hear the baby's heartbeat together and smile. Maybe they would feel like a family again. The car pulled up in front of the hospital, interrupting her thoughts. "We're here," the driver said kindly. Aisha thanked him and stepped out carefully, adjusting the strap of her bag on her shoulder. The hospital building stood tall and bright, its glass entrance reflecting the morning light. Families moved in and out of the doors, some smiling, some anxious, some pushing strollers. Aisha walked slowly into the maternity wing and checked in at the front desk. "Good morning," the receptionist said warmly. "Name?" "Aisha Bennett." The woman typed for a moment before nodding. "You can head to the waiting area. The doctor will call you shortly." Aisha thanked her and turned down the hallway, her sneakers tapping softly against the polished floor. That was when she heard it. A laugh. Deep. Familiar. Her heart skipped. No, that can't be. She stopped walking. The laugh came again. "Marcus." Her chest tightened instantly. Aisha slowly followed the sound down the hallway until she reached the maternity waiting area. As she turned the corner, her eyes landed on a sight that made the world around her freeze. Marcus was sitting in one of the chairs. But he wasn't alone. Beside him sat a pregnant woman whose belly was nearly as large as Aisha's. The woman was beautiful, tall, and confident, with smooth dark skin and a sleek shoulder-length bob haircut. She wore a fitted red maternity dress paired with designer heels and a stylish black handbag resting beside her chair. Marcus leaned toward her, smiling warmly as he spoke. His arm rested comfortably around the woman's shoulders. The intimacy between them was unmistakable. Aisha felt the air leave her lungs. Her fingers tightened around her medical folder. For a moment she thought maybe she was imagining things. Maybe she had misunderstood what she was seeing. But then Marcus gently placed his hand on the woman's belly. The gesture was soft, protective. The same gesture Aisha had once dreamed he would show her. Her heart shattered. Without realizing it, Aisha began walking toward them. "Marcus." Her voice was quiet but clear. Marcus turned his head. The moment his eyes landed on her, the color drained from his face. "Aisha." The other woman looked between them, confused. Aisha stopped a few feet away, trying to steady her breathing. What are you doing here? Marcus asked, his voice tense. Aisha stared at him in disbelief. My doctor's appointment, she replied slowly. What are you doing here? Silence fell between them. The other woman's expression hardened as she studied Aisha. Marcus, Aisha continued, her voice trembling slightly. Who is she? Marcus leaned back in his chair and rubbed his forehead as if the situation was merely inconvenient. The woman crossed her arms. I think you should answer her, she said calmly. Marcus stood up with an irritated sigh. You really want the truth? He asked. Aisha nodded weakly. Her heart pounded so loudly it almost drowned out everything else. Marcus gestured toward the woman. This is Vanessa. Vanessa looked at Aisha with a faint, confident smile. Marcus's next words sliced through the air like a blade. I regret marrying you. The hallway suddenly felt too small. Too quiet. Aisha blinked, certain she had heard wrong. What? Marcus didn't hesitate. She's the one I love, he said, placing his hand on Vanessa's shoulder. Aisha stared at him, her mind struggling to process the cruelty of his words. Her chest tightened. Her vision blurred. Everything inside her collapsed at once. Her knees gave out beneath her. She sank down onto the hospital floor as tears poured down her face. The folder slipped from her hands, papers scattering across the polished tiles. Several people in the waiting room turned to stare, whispering quietly. But Marcus didn't move to help her. He simply looked down at her with a mixture of irritation and impatience. Vanessa stood up and adjusted her dress. We should go, she said to Marcus. Marcus nodded. Without another word, the two of them walked past Aisha, leaving her sitting on the cold floor with her heart completely shattered. Aisha wrapped her arms around her stomach as sobs shook her body. The baby shifted inside her again. And in that moment, surrounded by strangers in a hospital hallway, Aisha realized something devastating. The man she loved had never planned to choose her. The following morning felt heavier than the one before. Aisha barely slept that night. The memory of Marcus standing beside another pregnant woman replayed in her mind over and over again like a cruel loop she couldn't escape. Every word he said echoed painfully in her ears. I regret marrying you. She's the one I love. By sunrise, her eyes were swollen from crying. She sat quietly at the kitchen table in the same modern townhouse that once felt like the beginning of a beautiful life. Now it felt like a place filled with broken promises. Her hands rested on a warm mug of tea she hadn't even touched. The baby shifted inside her stomach again, reminding her that no matter how much pain she felt, she wasn't alone. At least not completely. Around mid-morning, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the silence. Aisha's heart skipped. Marcus. The front door opened. His footsteps were calm and unhurried as he walked into the house, dressed neatly in a charcoal gray suit as if nothing significant had happened the day before. His presence filled the room, but the warmth that once came with it was gone. He placed a manila envelope on the table. Aisha, he said flatly. Her eyes slowly moved from the envelope to his face. What is this? You know what it is? Her stomach tightened. She stared at the envelope for a long moment before opening it with trembling hands. The papers inside were thick and official, the bold words at the top making her chest ache. Divorce petition. Her vision blurred. You filed already? She whispered. Marcus leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone casually. I don't like dragging things out. Aisha felt her throat tighten. Marcus, I'm pregnant with your child. He didn't look up. You'll manage. The coldness in his voice felt unreal. For years she had loved this man. She had supported him when he was building his business from nothing. She had stood by him during sleepless nights and stressful deals. She had believed they were building a future together. And now he was discarding her like she meant nothing. Tears slid down her cheeks. What about the baby? She asked again, her voice cracking. Your son or daughter, don't you care? Marcus finally lifted his eyes to her. I'll send some money when I can, he said indifferently. But I'm starting a new life now. Aisha's heart shattered all over again. Vanessa. That was the new life he meant. Her fingers trembled as she held the pen resting on the table. Signing the papers felt like signing away the life she once believed in. Is she pregnant with your baby too? Aisha asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer. His silence said enough. The tears came harder now. But after several long seconds, Aisha forced herself to steady her breathing. For the baby. Slowly, painfully, she signed the papers. Her signature looked shaky against the clean white page. Marcus walked over and collected the documents without a trace of emotion. Good, he said. No apology. No regret. Nothing. He placed the papers back in the envelope and headed toward the door. For a brief second, Aisha thought he might stop. Maybe look back. Maybe say something kind. But he didn't. The door closed behind him with a quiet click. And just like that, Marcus Bennett walked out of her life. Aisha sat alone at the table long after he left. The house felt emptier than ever. That night, she slowly packed some of Marcus's remaining things into boxes. Each shirt, each pair of shoes, each tie reminded her of memories that now felt meaningless. Eventually, she couldn't hold it in anymore. She sank onto the living room couch and cried. Not just quiet tears. Deep, painful sobs that shook her entire body. I didn't deserve this, she whispered through the tears. Her hand rested protectively on her stomach. The baby moved again. The small movement forced her to breathe. For the first time since Marcus left, a new thought entered her mind. She had someone else to live for now. The next few weeks became a blur of lonely doctor visits, restless nights, and growing responsibilities. Without Marcus's income helping with the bills, things quickly became difficult. Aisha picked up extra remote work where she could, carefully budgeting every dollar. Some days were harder than others. Some mornings she woke up hopeful. Other mornings she woke up crying. But every time she felt like giving up, she placed her hand over her stomach and reminded herself why she had to keep going. This baby deserves love, she would whisper. Even if she had to give all that love alone. What Aisha didn't know was that life was quietly preparing a turning point she never expected. Someone from her past was about to walk back into her life. And that meeting would change everything. By the time Aisha reached her 8th month of pregnancy, life had settled into a quiet routine of survival. The large townhouse she once shared with Marcus no longer felt like home. Too many memories lived in the walls, memories of promises, laughter, and dreams that now meant nothing. Eventually, she moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment on the quieter side of Atlanta. It wasn't luxurious, but it was peaceful, and most importantly, it was affordable. Her days were simple. Doctor appointments, part-time remote work, and preparing for the baby's arrival. Some evenings she would sit by the small window in her living room, watching the city lights flicker to life while gently rubbing her stomach. You and me, she would whisper softly. We're going to be okay. Despite the loneliness, Aisha was stronger than she realized. One warm afternoon after finishing a prenatal class nearby, Aisha decided to stop by a small cafe across the street. The place was cozy and welcoming, filled with the rich scent of coffee and soft jazz playing in the background. She ordered a smoothie and sat by the window, enjoying a rare moment of quiet. Her phone buzzed occasionally with work emails, but otherwise the world felt calm. After finishing her drink, she slowly stood and walked outside. Just as she stepped onto the sidewalk, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Cullinan pulled up along the curb. The vehicle looked almost unreal compared to the modest buildings around it. Its polished body reflected the afternoon sun as people nearby paused to admire it. The driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out. He wore a perfectly tailored black coat over a fitted turtleneck and dark trousers, his polished shoes gleaming as they touched the pavement. Designer sunglasses covered his eyes, and his posture carried the quiet confidence of someone who was used to success. He glanced around for a moment before his gaze suddenly landed on Aisha. His expression changed instantly. Aisha! She froze. The voice felt strangely familiar. He slowly removed his sunglasses. Her eyes widened. Daniel Carter. her childhood best friend. Growing up, Daniel had been the quiet boy who always looked out for her in school. He had been tall even back then, always calm and thoughtful, often helping her with homework or walking her home after class. They had shared countless afternoons talking about their dreams for the future. But life had taken them in different directions after high school. And now here he was, standing in front of her. Except he looked completely different from the boy she remembered. He had grown into a strikingly handsome man, his build strong and athletic, his beard neatly groomed. Success seemed to follow him in the way he carried himself. Daniel stared at her for a moment, still trying to process the surprise. "Wow, it's really you." Aisha let out a small laugh of disbelief. "I can't believe this." He stepped closer, smiling warmly. "I haven't seen you in years." "Me neither." His eyes lowered slightly, and that's when he noticed her belly. The smile on his face softened. "You're pregnant." Aisha instinctively placed a hand over her stomach. "Yes." Daniel studied her carefully, noticing the quiet sadness behind her eyes. "Where's your husband?" he asked gently. For a moment, Aisha didn't respond. She looked down at the sidewalk, gathering herself. "He left," she finally said. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "Left?" He didn't press for details right away, but something protective flickered in his expression. "Well," he said calmly, "you shouldn't be standing out here too long. Want to sit for a bit?" They walked back into the cafe and sat near the window. As they talked, Daniel learned pieces of what had happened. Marcus's distance, the hospital incident, the divorce. Each detail made Daniel quieter. By the time she finished, he leaned back in his chair, shaking his head slightly. "I can't believe someone would treat you like that," he said. Aisha gave a small shrug. "Life happens." But Daniel could see the strength it had taken for her to even say those words. Before they left, Daniel insisted on driving her home. "No arguments," he said with a small smile. "You're 8 months pregnant." The ride was comfortable and quiet. The inside of the Rolls-Royce was luxurious, soft leather seats and warm lighting surrounding them. Yet Daniel spoke to her with the same kindness he had when they were teenagers. When they arrived at her apartment building, he looked around briefly. "You're staying here?" "It's temporary," she said. "Just until I figure things out." Daniel nodded slowly. From that day forward, Daniel began appearing in her life more often. Sometimes he brought groceries. Other times he drove her to doctor appointments, so she wouldn't have to go alone. He never made her feel like a burden. Instead, he treated her with patience and respect. One evening after a checkup, they were sitting in the car when Aisha turned to him. "You've done more for me in a few weeks than Marcus did during my whole pregnancy," she said quietly. Daniel looked at her seriously. "That's because you deserve better than what he gave you." Months later, when Aisha went into labor, Daniel was the one who rushed her to the hospital. Hours later, a baby boy was born. When the nurse carefully placed the baby in Daniel's arms while Aisha rested, his expression softened in a way no one had ever seen before. "He's perfect," Daniel whispered. Aisha smiled weakly from the hospital bed. "His name is Noah." Daniel looked down at the baby, a protective warmth settling in his chest. From that moment on, something new began forming between them. Not just friendship, but a future neither of them had expected. 2 years later, Aisha's life looked nothing like the painful days she once struggled through. The sun poured through the tall windows of the modern mansion she now lived in with Daniel. The house sat in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods outside Atlanta, surrounded by tall trees, perfectly trimmed lawns, and quiet streets where luxury cars lined the driveways. The interior of the home reflected Daniel's refined taste. Marble floors, warm lighting, elegant artwork, and large open spaces that felt both sophisticated and welcoming. Aisha walked through her spacious walk-in closet, carefully adjusting the sleeve of a soft white designer dress. Her long curls flowed freely over her shoulders today, and her makeup was natural yet radiant. Motherhood had only made her more beautiful. The sadness that once lingered in her eyes had been replaced by confidence and peace. From downstairs, she could hear the joyful laughter of a toddler. "Noah!" She smiled instantly. Walking toward the staircase, She looked down into the living room where Daniel sat on the large cream-colored couch, pretending to struggle as Noah climbed onto his shoulders. "Noah Carter, you're getting too strong for me," Daniel said dramatically. The little boy burst into giggles. Again. Again. Noah had Daniel's calm eyes and Aisha's warm smile. At 2 years old, he was full of curiosity and energy, running through the house like he owned every corner of it. Aisha leaned against the staircase railing, watching them with a soft expression. 2 years ago, she had been terrified about raising a child alone. But Daniel had changed everything. A year after Noah was born, Daniel proposed to her in the quietest, most sincere way possible. It wasn't flashy or public. Just the two of them sitting in the backyard garden one evening while Noah slept inside. He had taken her hand gently. "You don't have to do life alone anymore," he told her. Tears had filled her eyes then, just like they did now when she remembered it. They married a few months later in a beautiful private ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family. Daniel legally adopted Noah shortly after, proudly giving the little boy his last name. From that day forward, Noah became his son in every way that mattered. Downstairs, Daniel finally noticed Aisha standing there. "Well, look who decided to join us," he said with a playful smile. Aisha walked down the stairs gracefully. "You're teaching him how to cause trouble already." Daniel lifted Noah off his shoulders and placed him on the couch. "That's an important life skill," he said. Aisha laughed softly. Moments like this still felt surreal sometimes. Daniel had built a powerful tech company over the years, and his success allowed them to live comfortably. Luxury cars in the garage, vacations to beautiful places, and opportunities Aisha never imagined for herself or Noah. But what meant the most to her wasn't the wealth. It was the way Daniel treated them. He respected her, listened to her, loved Noah without hesitation. That evening, the three of them sat outside on the patio while the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Noah played with his toy cars on the outdoor table while Daniel sat beside Aisha. After a quiet moment, Daniel reached over and gently kissed her forehead. "You deserved this life from the beginning," he said softly. Aisha looked at him. For years she had believed Marcus's rejection meant she wasn't enough. But Daniel had shown her something different. "You gave us this life," she replied. Daniel shook his head slightly. "No. You survived the worst part before I even came back into the picture." Inside the house, Noah's laughter echoed again as he chased a small toy across the patio. Aisha watched him with a peaceful smile. Everything she once feared, raising a child alone, struggling to survive, never being loved again, had turned into a life full of warmth and stability. But while her world had grown brighter, someone else's world had fallen apart completely. Across the city, Marcus Bennett was learning a painful truth. The woman he chose over his family had never truly chosen him at all. Life had not turned out the way Marcus Bennett imagined. 2 years earlier, he believed he had made the best decision of his life when he walked away from Aisha. Vanessa had been exciting, glamorous, and full of confidence. She made him feel powerful, admired, and important. Being with her felt like an upgrade from the quiet life he once had. At least that's what he thought. Now Marcus sat in a small, dimly lit apartment on the edge of the city, staring at a pile of unpaid bills scattered across a worn wooden table. The expensive suits he once wore were gone, replaced by simple shirts that looked wrinkled and tired. Everything in his life had collapsed. Vanessa, the woman he had chosen over his own family, had disappeared months earlier. At first she had claimed to be helping him manage certain financial transactions related to his construction business. Marcus trusted her completely, signing documents and approving transfers without paying much attention. By the time he realized something was wrong, it was too late. Vanessa and the man she had secretly been working with had drained a massive amount of money from his company accounts and vanished. The business he had spent years building quickly fell apart. Creditors began calling. Lawsuits followed. The expensive house was gone. The luxury cars were repossessed. Marcus had even taken a paternity test shortly before Vanessa disappeared. The baby she claimed was his. Wasn't. The betrayal hit him harder than anything he had ever experienced. For the first time in his life, Marcus understood what it felt like to lose everything because of one terrible decision. One rainy afternoon, Marcus walked slowly through a busy shopping district in Atlanta, his jacket pulled tightly around him. His life had become a constant search for temporary work and cheap meals. As he passed a popular restaurant, something caught his eye. A sleek black luxury SUV had just parked outside. The driver's door opened. A tall, well-dressed man stepped out first. Marcus immediately recognized him from somewhere, but couldn't place where. Then the passenger door opened. Aisha stepped out. Marcus froze. She looked completely different from the broken woman he remembered in the hospital hallway. She wore an elegant designer coat, her hair styled beautifully, and her posture carried quiet confidence. She looked healthy, peaceful, happy. A small boy climbed out of the car next. The little boy held her hand tightly. Marcus's heart dropped into his stomach. That must be the baby. Before he could stop himself, Marcus rushed toward them. Aisha! She turned at the sound of her name. For a moment, their eyes met. Daniel immediately stepped closer to her, his protective instinct clear as he placed a calm hand around her waist. Marcus looked desperate now. Aisha, please, can we talk? She studied him quietly. The man standing in front of her barely resembled the one she used to know. His clothes looked worn, his face thinner, his confidence completely gone. What do you want, Marcus? She asked calmly. His voice shook. I made a mistake. Daniel remained silent beside her, watching carefully. Marcus continued, his words tumbling out quickly. Vanessa lied to me. The baby wasn't mine. She stole from me. My business collapsed. I lost everything. Aisha listened without interrupting. Rain began falling lightly around them. Marcus stepped closer, desperation written across his face. I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed everything between us, but I've learned my lesson. Please, I want my family back. Noah looked up curiously at the man speaking, holding Daniel's hand now. Aisha glanced at her son before looking back at Marcus. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she spoke calmly. You didn't lose us because of a mistake. Marcus's expression tightened. You lost us because of who you chose to be. Her voice wasn't angry. It was final. Marcus looked at Daniel then, finally understanding the life she had built without him. Daniel gently squeezed Aisha's hand. Without another word, Aisha turned and began walking toward the restaurant with Daniel and Noah beside her. Marcus stood frozen on the sidewalk as the small family walked away together. He watched Daniel lift Noah into his arms while Aisha smiled at them both. A real family. The kind he once had. The rain continued falling as Marcus remained standing there, the weight of regret pressing heavily on his chest. For the first time in his life, he truly understood something painful. He hadn't just lost his wife. He had lost the life he could have had. And this time, there was no way to get it back. Finally, we have come to the end of this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Do well to like and subscribe to my channel for more interesting stories.